One.
Okay, so now we've got three slides talking about the cities of Phoenicia. So mountains separated city-states. So they had individual city-states, but they weren't united because mountains were separating them. They refer to themselves as citizens of the individual city-states and not as Phoenicians. They didn't consider themselves part of all of the greater land of Canaan. They just considered themselves as individual city-states. Each of these city-states was ruled by a priest king, and later the king was forced to share power with a council. So then it wasn't just one person ruling, then they could share the power. Let's move on to the second cities of Phoenicia slide. So the cities had protective walls that were built around them, and they were crowded with narrow streets. So they had very narrow streets. They needed to have a lot of people living in this small area. And then also within the walls, they would have these artisan and merchant shops. So remember, artisans are people that are creating things like pottery and clothing and things like that to sell. And merchants were people that bought things from other people to sell. And so they would have these shops along in these walls as well. So they would have protective walls around the city, and then crowded narrow streets, and then they would also have shops within the walls as well. So now let's move on to the third slide. Okay, so this is the last slide in the cities of Phoenicia. So right outside the city wall, there was a seaport. And this was where there was a center of economic activity because they had so much trade that they did with other areas, with other civilizations, that they constantly had things coming and going at the seaport. So goods taken from the port were then sent to warehouses to be stored for sale or for shipment for somewhere else. Because the merchants would then, they could come and buy them to sell to somebody else, or they would come and pick them up to sell to somebody else. Um, or if they was just stopping there on the way to go somewhere else, then they would just store it there until they needed to ship it again. Okay, so these are the three slides talking about cities of Phoenicia and how they were set up.